Hello and welcome back to the Get Sculpted podcast. I'm very excited for this episode. I always say that they're all exciting, but this is another important one. We're going to be talking about genetics. Actually, more specifically, we're talking about your habits because the reality is it is not your genetics that are holding you back. Even if you think that it is actually things that are more in your control, which is the great news. Okay, so I always like to start with one of my favorite quotes, which is that I'm going to call you up, not call you out. So that's what we're doing for you today. Because one of the biggest, quite frankly, excuses that we hear is, it's just my genetics. And listen, this is coming from someone who, like, I always heard that growing up. I remember when I was younger and I was overweight and I was kind of complaining to my mom about, like, I really like hate my legs and whatever I was saying. I was overweight. And she's like, well, what are we supposed to do? The women in our family are just not meant to be skinny. And then that kind of stuck with me. And then like that, I just internalized like, okay, yeah, we're not one of those skinny people. And a lot of people say that, the women in their family have said, well, everyone in our family is overweight. We just are known to have a slow metabolism. Right. But the reality of that is that genetics might load the gun, but your lifestyle is what's going to pull the trigger. Okay, yeah. So that means you might have a predisposition to some things genetically. A lot of those things, you have more of a predisposition to the habits that you've seen modeled, which we'll talk about. But at the end of the day, in all these circumstances, it is your choices that are going to decide how you show up. Mm-hmm. So what has the most powerful impact on your physique, on your metabolism, on the amount of muscle that you build, on the amount of fat that you lose? It is absolutely down to the way that you spend your time, the way that you show up, basically your habits. It's not your DNA. This is going to have the most impactful change. And might I add that you might be thinking, oh, but I have a curvy shape. Oh, but I have this. It's not about like you're changing your body shape or looking identical to someone else. Like we're talking about like your ability specifically to get lean and to build muscle, because that is something that everybody is capable of. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how your family was. It doesn't matter that you got picked last in gym class. Hello, speaking from experience, you can change it. Anything you guys want to add, like anecdotes for how that showed up for you guys?
No, I'm excited to get into this one because I know that one of the things we want to talk about is exactly that, just like the generational patterns. And I think that a lot of women don't realize how much that's at play. So I'm just really excited to get into this topic.
Let's do it.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a few things that come to mind too, even before we dive in. It's just all the things that like I remember hearing and that I've heard from clients that really like illustrate this. The things we heard growing up. So for example, finish your plate. That's a really big one. A lot of people's parents have said like they have trouble listening to their hunger cues now because they've been told to finish their plate. And for me, I never had to get told to finish my plate. I just finished it. I was like an emotional eater when I was a kid, but that's a whole other story. The wasting food was like a big one. Definitely eating till I was stuffed was like the norm. Like I always had it in my mind to finish my plate. And that was even until recently. Like I would go to a restaurant and be like, I just never thought it was like an option to not finish everything that you're eating. Like I ordered it, but then you think about it and you're like, well, like I would never make something this big for myself at home.
Yeah.
And exercise was something you do because you're fat. Like that's what my parents would tell me. They're like, you got to like burn it off at the gym, which is funny because exercise doesn't even burn that many calories. But, I remember when I was 12 and I went on my first diet and my parents had like a spin bike downstairs and I swear to God, it was broken and had no resistance. So it was just
literally,
it was just spinning. So it would just be like, not even sweating really. And just on this bike that doesn't have any resistance. Anyways. And I just thought, okay, this is what I got to do because I'm overweight.
Yeah.
So these are all the things that are baked into your mind. Is there anything else that has shown up for your guys' clients?
I think one that's come up recently is, because what you've said has all been true, is also families who grew up with scarcity and very little, and how when they're now adults and they're showing up with more success and more money or more security, they feel like an overindulgence occurs because they're remembering all the times that they didn't have and now they have. And so that ability to self-regulate around food can be really, really challenging, and knowing when to stop because, they were taught like, oh, when we have it, eat it because we don't know when we're going to get it again. Whereas there's also the reverse of like, there's starving children in Africa. Like you finish everything I made from you. Like
I've heard both of those.
I've heard both, right? So there's both of those things. And then, even in my household growing up with like diets every so often, like my parents would buy the book, and go through it. And whether it was like doctor this person or so-and-so this one and like we did
whatever
them all.
And flavor of the month was.
The flavor of the month. Yeah. And, that was their effort to try and be healthier. And I think that's what like society also pushed on everybody at that time, right? It was like, this is how you get healthy, is you do this diet. And we know so much more now today than we did 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So it's just interesting.
Can I just piggyback on that scarcity? Because I think that there's so many people who will relate to that. So in my experience, being like first generation born in Canada from immigrant parents and family, scarcity was a real thing. So it was almost like, not only like we have it, so eat it, but it was also like, we didn't have it, so I want to like, it was almost like an overcompensation, right? Because it wasn't just about like, we have it, now we eat it. It's like, I want to give you like
everything
10 times the amount.
I want to give you the interest.
Exactly. And again, it's noble, right? Like you understand where it comes from, but what I guess previous generations don't realize is just how much that skewed everything for us. So I know we'll get into it, but I think that this is such an important conversation because of that. Because I think there's so much that we've just come to naturally without even realizing it when it comes to this.
And the theme here that we've touched on so well already is that when you know better, you do better. And it's also highlighting that, like, it's not saying that hey, the women in your family, the people in your family didn't struggle and they did the best they could. And we are highlighting that, right? But it's also, and is a powerful word. And now we know better. Now I have the power to break the cycle. Now I'm choosing to do things differently. And that's what we want to share with you here. And also, like, if you're thinking, hey, I don't really know where to start, I'm the first generation to kind of break these cycles. This is what we help our clients with. So you can always reach out to us. We can be your safe space. We can help you get started. And we always have some info in the show notes for you guys to be able to do that. So Mara, I know you're very good with like the mental and kind of emotional side of things. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into what you see with coaching women and like, what do these patterns actually look like for you?
Yeah. So we've actually touched on a lot of them. So it's just a matter of going a little bit more deeply with these. So I think everybody can kind of understand now that what we're talking about here is conditioning. So things that you think might be genetics are actually conditioning from how you were raised, the things you saw. So we already talked a little bit about the food part. The other thing I will kind of talk about, because I know I felt this, but the other thing about food is that it can often be deeply connected to like reward, right? Like reward connection. So, or actually comfort as well. Like one of the things I remember seeing a lot was, adults coming home from work, like it was a stressful day. I'm just going to give me that wine or let me have those sweets. And it became something to soothe and comfort themselves when they were stressed. The other thing, I actually saw this when I was teaching, was kids would tell me, like, I got an A+ on my test and like we went for McDonald's so there was a lot of that like rewarding. Yes, food reward, right? And so of course, like I'm thinking as adults, like of course we default to food when we're burnt out or overwhelmed or we want a reward. Our brains automatically go to food and drink because that's what we have seen, makes us feel better, makes us feel good, makes us feel proud. Then we touch on this too, the idea of movement. Like how many of us grew up seeing movement framed as like something to make you skinny, something to burn calories. Whereas now we are proponents of, okay, this makes you feel strong and powerful. And it gives you the ability to have like functional movement in your life now as you age. So I also vividly remember the women in my life saying, "It's too much, I need to jump on the treadmill." Or gosh, I remember like my family was very like aerobics, into aerobics. And I remember my mom even saying like, I would do 2 aerobics classes a day. And it was just, right? Like, so that idea of overtraining and thinking that movement was for the sole purpose of shrinking yourself. And then this kind of relates to the idea of rest and recovery. A lot of us internalize the idea that rest and recovery is synonymous with being lazy.
Yes.
Right. Especially for women. Like if you slow down, it means you're falling behind or you're failing at something, when in reality, we know that rest and recovery is actually a skill. It is crucial for your mental and your physical health. So I think the biggest problem is that these start so early. So by the time we kind of become conscious, if we ever are, it's just played on repeat for decades. And it's the narrative we inherit. And it takes deep work. Like for some women, this will be the narrative that lasts their entire lives. Unless you become aware of these things, you can't change them. So we want you to, listen to this and reflect and just think to yourself, like how much of this actually is my conditioning, like what I've actually been used to, like, was I actually born with this? Or is this what I learned from, default from what my family's done? And then now that genetics is not actually what's at play, you can work to unlearn those behaviors, right? And so we talked about, listening to your hunger cues, right? Not eating on autopilot. That's a huge one. Learning how to train for strength and not just to get skinny, fueling your body, obviously, instead of restricting it. And all of these things are going to break the pattern and kind of running your whole life. Anything you ladies want to add there?
I just want to add something around listening to hunger cues because this is so difficult because we we societally eat quickly, we're on the go, we're in a rush, we're
Yeah.
distracted a lot of times, we're not even maybe sitting when
Nope.
we're eating. And so one of the things that I really encourage my clients to do when we're talking about exploring hunger cues and identifying when we get to
Right.
comfortable fullness and satiation is a couple of things. One, actually sit down to eat on purpose, like not eating while distracted. And that's not
Yeah.
always possible at every meal, but at least a handful of times a week
Mhm.
to create that experience for you to have the opportunity to practice listening for hunger
Right.
cues. And then the second piece is a really easy tactic is to put your fork down between bites.
Mhm.
Because we're also used to rushing. And so to interrupt the pattern of just like shoveling food in our mouths and then we're done in 5 minutes and then go, our brain and our body haven't had a chance to
Yes.
catch up to one another to actually create that like conversation of like, are you full? Are you hungry? Like what's going on
What's
here?
actually
Like,
happening?
yeah, what's happening? Because I need to
Yeah.
tell her to like slow down, stop, keep going. So like, let me know.
Good point.
And by putting the fork down, you actually have a chance to then chew your food more slowly, to swallow. Maybe you're talking to somebody, you can converse, and then you can pick up the fork and
Yeah, I
continue
love that.
on. And that one little pause creates just enough time for you to slow down just enough to then start to acknowledge how full am I as I
Right.
eat. So that's just one tip if you're listening, like, well, how do I actually do that? This is what I would recommend.
That's a great point.
Yes, that's a good one. I like that you added that. It's a skill that you build, and
Totally.
just it's if you're listening to this, I'm just thinking some of these concepts we're sharing like high level. It's a podcast in itself, right? Like the
Yeah.
hunger cues, training
Yeah, it
for
is.
strength and not burning calories. I think we've talked about that. We certainly have. But like each of these things, like if you are listening to it and you're like, oh, okay, I get it, but I don't quite know what that means.
Right.
Just hopefully we planted that seed for you, and just keep listening to our podcast and you will learn. But if you,
You
do
will
want,
learn.
yeah, you will get there. But if you do need support, just feel free to message
Yeah.
us and we can help you with that.
Yeah. So T, I think this is where it's important now to talk about like the science that's going to tie this all together. So can you take us through that a little bit?
Absolutely. You know me, I love to just like cut to the chase and tell it like it is. Because here's the thing, I find like in my experience, a lot of people just need to hear the like blunt term, which is that there is one way to gain body fat, and that is excessive calories. Okay. Like it's calories in and calories out. And that oversimplifies it. But there's things that influence that, right? So
Of
like,
course.
your hormones are going to influence your appetite, your energy, your metabolism to a degree. But at the end of the day, like if you have a tendency to gain more body fat, it's because of what you're eating, how much you're eating. And that might be hard because in the past you might have said, oh, I thought I was just overweight because of everybody in my family is overweight. But it's the eating habits you picked up, right? Like maybe you didn't have a whole lot of home cooked meals, or maybe you did, but they were a lot of cooked with like a lot of oil and butter, and there wasn't a lot of protein. And I know my parents have habits now that I recognize that in 10 million years they're not going to change them, but like they will not eat all day long and then absolutely eat a ton from like 4 p.m. to 10. And then they're like, I eat one meal a day. I'm like, yeah, and you're eating about like 3,000 calories in
Right.
that 6 hours. But, like that's the kind of things where that's what I saw modeled. That's what they think is normal. So you have to understand that at the end of the day, when you take the power back and recognize, like, I have adopted these habits and way of thinking and these eating patterns that have led me to struggle with my weight, to not be lean, to not build muscle. Like it wasn't actually like what's in my DNA, then
Yes.
you can change it. All right. And I want to share a little bit of the science here because I think that's important. So we know that genetics do play a role because when we look at someone in the Olympia or the Olympics or like the Olympia is like the bodybuilding, of like top bodybuilding competition in the world for those who don't know, even like Olympic athletes in different sports. Obviously there's a genetic component, but like they're all working hard AF. Like we know that but
That's their job is
Yeah.
to like train for that.
Not everyone can be Michael Phelps, all right? Like even if you absolutely dedicate your life to swimming, he's got like this crazy wingspan and the ratios and like they're just built for it, but then you back up the genetics with the hard work, all right?
Yes.
But I think people are so quick to first of all, like none of us are Olympic athletes, all right? So let's just shelve that for a second. Because you're not competing on stage even probably if you're listening to this. Maybe you are, but like we can all build muscle and lose body fat. Right? We just might not be like the absolute best in the world at doing it, but it can happen for everyone. So what studies show is that your genetics are going to influence your potential for body composition. Some people do build muscle faster. Some people have a higher metabolic rate and they lose body fat faster, but it doesn't actually influence the whole entire outcome. So for example, you might be genetically predisposed to store fat in a certain area. And a good example that comes to mind is like South Asian people. I often hear this. They're like, they are statistically more prone to storing more body fat in the belly and more visceral fat, which puts them at a health risk for certain conditions. And they're also predisposed to insulin resistance, right? Predisposed. However, when we look at the South Asian diet, a lot of it is very carb heavy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is where that plays a role. So like their genetics over time have developed
Right.
them to like store more body fat, more visceral fat, and to, put on less muscle as well. But a big part of that is actually just the culture and like the way their lifestyle's set up. So it's not saying like, hey, we're going to abandon the culture. It's just being aware that like, it's not actually the fact in that example that I'm South Asian that I can't build muscle or lose body fat. It's that like, I need to make changes to make that more intentional. Right. And then proper training, which we always talk about what that looks like the lifting heavy enough, not just doing random F45 workouts, but like a heavy workout where it's like you're repeating the same thing every single week. You're really lifting with proper form, and your nutrition is not just clean eating, but it's like enough protein, enough calories to build the muscle. It's always going to override any sort of predisposition you have genetically. All right. And we know that like 70 to 80% of your results are going to come from lifestyle. Like that means everything in your control. Because you can fully control like the intensity of your training, your nutrition and how dialed in that is, your sleep and your stress.
That's
and
right.
Okay, you might argue, I don't have full control over that. You have some control, right? Like these are the
You
things
have more
that
control
are,
than you think.
you have more
also.
control than you think. You do, absolutely. So I want to break each of these down like and talk about like specifically what this looks like. So when it comes to building muscle, I hear obviously like people talk about the fat loss more, but I think people need to, we always talk about that. They need to think about building muscle as being more important. But what I do hear sometimes is like, oh, I just have a harder time putting on muscle. And here's the thing, like we know that your muscles are shaped differently and like they insert like the length of your muscles and like the shape that they take when they're fully developed is going to be a little bit different, right? Like Jord, you could, because you're more petite, be training like, put on 10 pounds of muscle. That's freaking massive, right?
It's a
like,
lot. Yeah. But also I was a swimmer. So for me, my quads and my shoulders will develop very quickly and easily because there's a lot of historical muscle there.
Exactly. And then like I actually always admired that about being petite. But then, we can always talk about this too, but it's like same thing with if you're petite, then when you gain body fat, it's also like it has less place to distribute. But someone like Coach Lindsay on our team, she's almost 6 feet tall. 10 pounds up and down is not really a huge visual difference. And her muscles, it takes longer to develop. Like, I've had clients with like very long legs and they're like, man, I'm really not seeing that muscle in my legs yet. And I'm like, yeah, but that's because like you just have very long limbs, right? Like it's more space to fill, right?
More
like think
surface
about
area.
if I'm taking sand and shoveling it into a hole, if the hole is deeper, like it's going to take longer, more sand, right? Like to fill the
get
hole.
there.
Yeah. So we just want to remember that. But it's not like in that case that you can't build muscle in your legs. It just means like you're going to need to build more muscle for it to be visible, right?
Yeah.
For it to really take that shape. You're going to need more strategic training, but it is possible. And then when it comes to getting lean as well. So it's interesting because genetics does influence and hormones do influence where you store body fat. And something for me, I'll just use myself as an example, is like I've always stored more body fat in the lower body, and most women are like that. So like they lean out from the top down. And I hear this all the time. A client of mine just said this to me, and she was like, I'm feeling like quite jacked or whatever she said. Like in the upper body, I'm good. I see the muscle definition. I don't really see my glutes and hamstrings. And I said, hey, listen, like you're gonna have to get leaner to see that because like for me, because obviously competing on stage, they really look at every little thing, but it's like, that's the last thing to come in. And I can't say, bam, I'm going to do 1,000,000 squats and my fat is going to burn off in my butt. Like it doesn't happen that way. You have to lose fat everywhere to get lean, to see yourself, like if you store more fat in the lower body, if you store more fat in the belly, you have to like, you might think, oh, it's not fair. My friend always has a flat stomach, even if she's like, whatever, 180 pounds or something. But it just, where you store the body fat is going to depend on your genetics. But the ability to lose body fat in general is down to like how much you're eating, what your nutrition looks like, and your consistency. I'm going to take a beat. Do you guys have anything to add to that so far?
No, you're hitting it on the head.
I'm predisposed to adding body fat to my breasts. So that's just my problem these days.
It's a good problem to have.
I was going to say jealous. No.
Well, the interesting thing is, and I was talking to my coach about this, is that the more muscle you build, muscle's metabolically active tissue. So you're actually going to have an easier time getting leaner when you have more muscle in an area. Yeah. So like, for example, like I know, and I did a DEXA scan, which was pretty cool, but I mean, it obviously showed what I can see with my own two eyes of like, I have more body fat in my lower body.
Right.
But my coach was like, listen, like building more muscle there is going to help you lean out,
Of course.
like in your subsequent lean outs. So in all these cases though, it's like I can't change my body shape. Like I could easily be like, well, I'm storing fat in my lower body, might as well just keep packing on the
Right.
fat. Like I'm not going to think that way. I'm like, okay, well, you know, if I do want to compete again, or if I just want a leaner lower body, I might have to like just get really, really lean for that to show. And some people might just get, you know, lean out in their legs first, or their legs never gain weight, but then it's like, where's the grass greener? Because they might be gaining more body fat in their belly. And that's
Right.
Anyway, so just know that like your fat distribution is genetic and hormonal, but the ability to lose body fat is absolutely in your control. And then I want to talk about diseases as well, because these are a very prevalent thing. And like, it's interesting because like I know my mom's side, like there's a lot of like the hormone related cancers and things like that. And like, you know, I think, I don't know about you guys, but I always have some kind of health anxiety where like, especially when I had high anxiety, I'd be like, oh, you know, what if I get this? What if I get that? And I'm always kind of worried about it. But what really calms me is knowing that most genetic like predispositions are really still like largely lifestyle determined.
Yes.
So in other words, like if I'm doing my best to like maintain a healthy level of muscle mass, the organ of longevity, like my body fat is low enough that like, you know, I don't have visceral fat, like I'm staying lean, and like my heart rate is like very healthy, like my resting heart rate, all that stuff, like you're dramatically decreasing your risk of developing that disease. So like I always hate when people are like, oh, you know, we could just die tomorrow, we might as well smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol. I'm like, that's the dumbest mindset I've ever seen in my life. Because if someone, oh, they smoked till they're 80 and they lived whatever, I'm like, yeah, but because they're a freaking genetic freak, or like they got lucky, like that doesn't mean that you should just abandon your health.
Right.
So yeah, it's like if you are, let me put it to you this way. I can't sit here and be like, I have 100% guarantee that if you do all these healthy things, you won't ever, God forbid, get like a serious disease. But your risk is a heck of a lot lower.
That's right.
And like,
Absolutely.
wouldn't you want to put your risk like at the bottom? Like if you are regularly strength training, if you have a high protein diet, if you're stabilizing your blood sugar with the way that you're eating, you're getting in regular movement. That's just your standard. That's your lifestyle. It's not something you do sometimes. You go for daily walks. You're like turning off the screens more than necessary. You're taking rest and recovery and like taking care of your mental health. And like, it's not that you're eliminating processed food. You're just choosing whole foods most of the time. You're adding more healthy things into your diet. You're getting in regular fiber, like all the basics that don't sound sexy. These things over time are literally what's going to turn off the expression of certain genes.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be like this massive, you know, overhaul. It just needs to be a few better decisions that are going to lead to that. And one quote I want to come back to is that genetics might determine your starting line, but not your finish line. And listen, if you guys are like listening to this and thinking like, man, this is like a wake up call. You know, I've been always like blaming my genetics, and I really feel like I need to get myself together. We can help you get started with this because we know that it's overwhelming to know like where the heck do you begin. So you can always send us a message, just throwing it out there on getsculpted.ca on Instagram. And like I said, we have it in the show notes if you guys want to contact us. So Jord, I would love if you would, you know, talk to us about how this isn't something that's your fault, but it is your responsibility to change it.
Yeah, I think one of the conversations that I'm often having with people is like, I want to be the one that changes the future for myself and for the generations that come after me. And that can feel really heavy. Like when you're the one doing the work, when you're the one that's making the changes in the family, when you're the one who's like, I'm going to choose the different actions, that's like, that can be a heavy load. That can have a lot of like, you know, share of your mind, because everything you do is going to be that much harder because you're the first one to do it, maybe in your family. And you're then setting that precedent for the people that you are raising in your family. And all of that is different because of the education, conditioning, upbringing, the examples, all the things that you guys have talked about throughout the episode so far. That's like almost working against you. And that's when I think women kind of adopt the mindset of like, it's my genetics. That's what they all mean, is like all of those things, the weight of it all, plus maybe they have a predisposition to diabetes or heart disease and all of that. But I think it's really that combined piece where it's like, do I really want to be the one that has to take the responsibility and ownership to direct the entire family lineage over to this whole new direction, which is building our healthiest, happiest, fittest body that literally lives as long as it possibly can. And so I think like being really ready to be taking on the ownership of that is something that I talk a lot about with women that are coming into working with us, because that's the point they're at, is like, I no longer want to live this way for the rest of my life. And I already see my kids adopting some of those habits and I don't like it. or I remember what it was like and I don't want them to get to that point. And so I think it's like really, really powerful to be the one who takes the ownership. But it can be, I also want to recognize it's really hard and it can weigh on you in different ways because you're learning the skills you never had. And then you're creating the environment for everybody else to benefit from the skills that you've now learned. And that's a heavy load for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's where I think women can get stuck and they can get overwhelmed and they can feel like it's too much. And
Right.
what I want to say about that is that, you know, that's where you want to lean into having systems
Yes.
and support and guidance. And you don't want to do it all at once, all at the same time. You want to make the changes one after another with a plan in place, because you're gonna, like when I was talking about the hunger cues, like you're gonna want time and space to practice that and not feel like you're in a rush.
Right.
I've had clients who will sit down and like, how do I make dinner time feel more flowy and flexible and happy, as opposed to like a fight about who's going to eat what and how much, you know?
Right.
And that's a skill, that's a practice, that's family dynamics, that's human dynamics, that's also like managing your own energy, that's also knowing what to cook. So when you think about like breaking all of this down, it's not just like, it's not your genetics, so like suck it up and make the changes.
Right.
It's like you're actually going to have to face a lot of things when you decide to focus on rebuilding where you're at and taking that ownership, taking that responsibility, because ultimately what you're building is a legacy of health and fitness, not just for you, but for your family. And I think that, you know, we've touched on a lot of the stuff that we were thinking about for building that. And I think like that's really the power in what we're trying to talk about today is like the genetics might load the gun, but your lifestyle and your habits pull the trigger or not. Right. And that's ultimately the gun you pass down to your children. So what do you want to pass down next is kind of the question I would be posing to you if you're listening today, because you don't want them to then turn back and be like, it was the way that I grew up.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right? Like, so now you're in the driver's seat of being like, what do I want to pass forward and pay forward? And what do I want to break the chain on now? And that's really powerful. So I have some questions for you girls, actually.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
What are a couple of habits or one habits that you picked up from your upbringing that you didn't realize that you had to break?
Mine was definitely you have to finish everything on your plate. Like we talked about that. I was like, it wasn't suggested. It was like, you do not waste food. You finish your dinner. If you don't, you go to bed and then you have it the next morning. Like I remember one time my cousin was over for a sleepover. I don't remember what we were having, but she didn't finish her plate. And my dad was like, if you don't finish, you're having this for breakfast the next morning. And I remember she was so upset. And sure enough, that's literally what was on the table the next morning. So, you know, I didn't question it, because also as a child, it's like you often don't question these things, which is why I think what you said, Jordan, is so powerful, because like your kids aren't going to, I mean, they'll challenge you for sure, but they're not going to question these things.
They're normal.
Right? So you've got to take that into account, because I certainly at like 6-7 years old wasn't going to fight my parents on that. But anyway, that was my big one. Like if it's on your plate, you finish it. And if you don't, then there's trouble.
Yeah. I had the same one as you, Mare.
Yeah.
What about you, T? Anything else?
Like I said, I always finish my food, but it was always like eating beyond the point of fullness.
Yeah.
It was always like the very, like you go hungry to a restaurant, especially like don't eat all day. And then when you get to a restaurant, have like a massive meal, because when you go out to eat, like that's when you really eat.
Yep.
Yeah.
And also just,
I can relate to that.
yeah, like just eating past a point of fullness. Like if it's in front of you, it gets finished. And definitely like exercise is what you do to be skinny, for sure.
Yeah.
100%. There was no discussion around like building muscle. Like that was not even on the radar.
Yeah.
That's wild. It's wild. Because we're all so different now. It's amazing. And
it is.
Yeah.
It actually is kind of cool when you think
It's
about
so
like
cool.
we the three of us in many, many ways broke a lot of generational habits that we could have easily repeated, but we chose not to.
Yeah.
I
And
know.
it's choice.
I think about that a lot too with like Brian, and I talk about that because he was so opposite of me. He was like a very picky eater, and I'm like, I'm so proud of him, because he's like, he had all these things for the first time lately, like chicken pot pie and like chili and like,
oh my gosh.
Like mixed things, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
things
yeah,
like
yeah.
one pot meals. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that, yeah, yeah, yeah. And like just vegetables in general. Like he's eaten a lot more of those. And
Good.
like he used to go to school with just toast for lunch.
Yeah.
So yeah, but anyway, he was like the skinny guy. And I was like the overweight kid. And then he's always like, as soon as we had boys, he's like, they're going to be a mesomorph. I'm like, well, what makes you say that? He's like, it's our lifestyle. And he's right though. Cause like the kids, I'm so proud of them. I'll see them eating. And I'm like, I know one time Hunter came home with like a school assignment and they were like, how should you build your plate? What should be most of it? And
I'm sure he went to town on that one.
Crushed
he did.
it.
He wrote protein, but he got it wrong. And I think they were like, it should be vegetables. And then I'm like, well, I just want you to know that was a good answer.
Oh my God.
I'm like, these people don't even lift. They're just talking. Not that you shouldn't eat vegetables, but I was like, I like where his mind is going.
Yeah,
So cute.
I love that. And I think about like even like our clients, like do you guys have an example of a success of one of your clients or someone that you've worked with that they've overridden some of those historical behaviors?
I do. I have one that comes to mind. I just talked about her yesterday. She had PCOS. She always struggled with her weight. And she had 2 young kids when we started. She was a stay-at-home mom. Always used to like not ever eating a meal herself, eating her kids' scraps. And then she not only lost like a ton of weight and kept it off, but she messaged me saying, hey, I actually had a 3rd pregnancy. And for the first time, I didn't have gestational diabetes.
Wow.
And yeah, so she improved her insulin because she had PCOS. So she had insulin resistance, but she had improved her insulin sensitivity so much just from, lo and behold, lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I love it. Yes, mine, I'm going to shout out my client, Rita, who's actually my aunt. I'm very proud of her. So this is like very familial, not just like a story. She turned 65 last year and she did a photo shoot with us. And when we were talking about everything afterwards, I mean, obviously I know the ins and outs of her life, but essentially she was like, we talked about all those generational things about like starving yourself, then overeating, like having to eat everything or, that scarcity mindset, the exercise piece was only to get skinny. And it was such a beautiful thing to see, but also to have the conversation after when she said like I dieted for 50 years, 50. And if I hadn't done this, if I hadn't broken these generational patterns and habits, she said, I would go to my grave dieting, starving myself, binging, like all of the things we talked about. And I mean, again, I have a soft spot because she's related to me, but it's like, this is what we help women do. So we probably collectively have hundreds of stories because I would say most women who come to us do have some level, maybe different depths of these habits, but everybody comes with some generational patterns when it comes to, I think, food and movement. And I'm very proud of what we do because we really are changing the script for these people, these women. I love it.
Yeah, I
100%.
love that. I love that.
Yep.
T, you want to wrap it up for us?
Absolutely. So just a couple reminders here for you and some big takeaways. Your DNA is not what's your destiny. Your actions are what determine your destiny. And if everyone in your family has struggled, that ends with you, and you have to be the one who changes the story. And your genetics might have handed you the gun, but your habits decide whether you pull the trigger. And remember one last thing, you're not stuck with what you have inherited. You can build what you want to become and who you want to become. So remember, if this hit home, guys, we would love if you guys would, number one, give the podcast a share, like tag us, getsculpted.ca. We love to see what landed for you the most. Send us a message on Instagram. Contact us through the show notes below if you want to reach out and you want some support here, because we can be like your little second family, helping you build that generational health, because it really is the most powerful gift you can give to yourself and children if you have them, or even just loved ones around you. So
Yes.
We hope you guys got some value from this, and can't wait for the next one.
Yeah.
Bye.